Hello, this is Justin with Justin's Web Design and More Business Today. In this video, we're going to learn about layouts. And this is a drag and drop editor, which means you can drag and drop elements into the website and into different areas. But unlike some drag and drop editors, it doesn't make it so you can drag an element anywhere you want. It goes into a grid, it goes into a row and column system, and that makes it so that the site can automatically reorient itself based on whether someone's using it on a tablet or a smartphone, or no matter what size monitor they have, that kind of stuff. So we have rows and columns are the basis of the layout, and the rows go left to right, and the columns go up and down. And so just to give you an example here, if we want to add a row, you go to row, one of the rows, and hit plus. Now I have a new row. You can see I highlight over it, see how it has a blue border around it, and it has one empty column in it. If I want to add a second column, I can go to add column, and now I have two empty columns. Now let's say I want to add some text into one of those columns. I can just come over here to the widgets, drag some text. You can review the video on text for more information. And here's some, my new paragraph of text. And then if I wanted to add an image, I go to widget, image, add an image. And if I wanted to resize either of these columns, if you look between, there's a bar, and if I highlight over it, it gives me a little double arrow. And say I want the image to be smaller, I can drag it to the right. And if I want the image to be bigger and the text to be smaller, I can drag it to the left. So you can resize the column. Another thing that you may have noticed as I was doing that is also when you're adding an element, kind of a shortcut, although it makes things a little more complicated if you ask me, is that you can actually, when you're dragging text in, you have an option a lot of times of, for instance, creating a new column. So if it says insert a new column, it's going to add the column and the text at the same time. So now I have more text and a third column, and then I could modify it that way. If I want to delete a column and delete all the contents of it, it's an empty column, and then you can see how it has a red box like that. If I want to delete a row, I can click on row and I can hit delete at the bottom. To go back to the widgets and everything, if we drop in the text, you can see it's offering to create a new row for me. So that can create a row of text. And you can see how a lot of times with just one column, it's all spread out like that. If I wanted to add a column, I could click plus, or I could just go in widget. Let's say we want to add an image again. We just drag the image and position it until the editor tells me, oh, you want to insert it into a new column. Click yes. Select the image like that. Now, one note, this is a good time to note too, that sometimes when you're moving text from one column to another, depending on what size it is, let's see if I can force it to do this. So let's say I have text that's in a column that's this size, and I drag it over into a column that's a different size. By default, it won't resize all the time to fit within the column that it's in. But if you look at the box, it has this little square here, and you can actually resize the box that the text is in. Now, the other way around works. If you drag a bigger block of text into a smaller, it'll automatically resize down. And if we want to, we have the image on one side, we have the text on the other, and you can add multiple items on one side and one item on the other. So for example, with this, a lot of times you might have a title on one side above the text, and then maybe you'd have a button below the text. So we have 3 items over here and 1 item over here. And we can drag and drop things as we see fit in here. Another thing that goes along the lines with this is if you want to align things, let's say we want this title to be aligned in the center. There's a couple ways to do this. You could highlight it and you could change the alignment here. But also just in general, the elements, like this button is an example. If you right click, you'll see you have this little thing here. It says align left, align center, align right. So it allows you to align elements. Not sure actually whether that would work with this or not. Yep, same thing. With the paragraph, same thing. So that's important to understand as far as, especially if you want to add a bunch of content, then understanding how the layouts work will help you a lot, because a lot of times people might try and just put everything into one big row, but that forces the columns to always be the same size and stuff like that. Whereas if I had multiple items that were similar to this, I'll show you a shortcut later, but you could create another row and do the same thing again, and by having them in their own rows, it just makes life easier as far as you can resize one column in one row. It doesn't affect the column, like this row is over here. These are evenly distributed between the two, and this one is resized to one side. So it allows you to manipulate this row by itself easier. That also makes it so that we could add a row underneath it. We'd have one row that has 2 columns, and then we could have another row that has 1 column. And then I should note here, this is a good time too to show you, I just added the row, and you can see this new row is above this row. If I want to move the rows around each other, I can click row, and it lets you move it down. So let me move the blank one down, or I could move the blank one up. So those little arrows help you move the row. The rows are something, the only thing really, that you don't drag and drop. So you can't drag and drop the order of the rows. I think that's the only thing. I can't think of another thing that you can't drag and drop, but you can't drag and drop the rows. But let's say we wanted to have one that has 2 columns. You might have one that has 3 columns, one that has 1 column. This allows you to do that easily. So that's my notes on layouts. Hopefully it helps. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.